Thank you, Mr Acting President. I rise to speak in support of the motion that has been moved by Mr Medic. And in doing so, I just wish to place on record some of the advances that have been made in this area. And I note, before I do that, I note that it is very concerning to hear of some of the reports around the sale of fur and the treatment of animals in that trade, and it is indeed very disturbing to hear that about the treatment of some of the animals when fur is being collected. It's unnecessary and distressing to hear some of the pain that animals can be placed in these circumstances. And having said that, and I will detail in a moment a bit more about what the government has done and will be doing. But of course, we will be recognising the sentience of animals as underpinning for any new laws, and that's an important step in advancing and in the recognition of animals and their treatment, and that they can and do feel pain. So the welfare of animals in Victoria is protected under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1986. And the keeping of fur species in Victoria, other than rabbits, would require a permit under the Catchment and Land Protection Act 1994 and would not be granted for keeping for fur production. Species farmed for their fur in other parts of the world, such as mink and raccoon dogs, are not permitted to be imported or kept in Victoria. The Australian Live Import List, made under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999 Commonwealth, does not list mink, raccoon dog or raccoons, thereby preventing the import of these species into Australia. The importation of cat and dog fur is also prohibited under Commonwealth law, namely the Customs Prohibited Exports Regulations 1958, except with the permission of the Federal Minister for Home Affairs. There are significant animal welfare issues associated with fur production overseas, and it is concerning that consumers here are not able to make an informed choice due to mislabelling of real fur products as fake fur. Globally, each year more than 100 million animals are killed for their fur. Around 85% of fur sold is from fur farming, with the remainder from trapping and hunting wild animals. Most of the animals farmed for their fur are mink, foxes, raccoon dogs, rabbits and chinchillas. The cage housing of animals on fur farms overseas appears highly restrictive and does not appear to meet the biological and behavioural needs of the species farmed. The Andrews Labor government is proud to have made significant improvements to animal welfare, with plans for further reform well advanced. The track record of this government speaks for itself. We legislated to ban puppy farms and provide $5 million to the RSPCA to investigate and shut down illegal puppy farms through a special investigations team. We passed laws that enshrine tenants' rights to keep pets. Animal cruelty charges have been increased, including doubling of some penalties. We've removed the requirement for pet greyhounds to be muzzled and have delivered a new welfare code for racing greyhounds. We have developed Victoria's first animal welfare action plan, and the plan was the result of an 18-month engagement with industry, stakeholder groups and individuals to reflect the community's expectations around animal welfare. We established Animal Welfare Victoria, a dedicated unit within the department, and Animal Welfare Victoria has brought together domestic animal and animal welfare research, policy, legislation, education and compliance functions. We also reformed the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee to ensure government receives expert evidence to support our busy animal welfare agenda. So all of this was on top of an amendment to the Code of Practice for the operation of breeding and rearing businesses within our first 6 months of being elected, and to require dog breeders to obtain a veterinary health check for all female dogs prior to each mating cycle. In 2015, we strengthened ministerial powers for the immediate seizure of animals in current or imminent animal welfare emergencies. We also toughened penalties for those who are found guilty of animal cruelty offences, introducing the ability for courts to ban someone from owning or being in charge of animals for life. The Labor government has delivered a $3 million boost to animal welfare grants in this year's budget, and we are working on what will be important reforms to our animal welfare laws. Labor is committed to modernising Victoria's animal welfare laws to support better harm prevention, improved education, a more effective regulatory response and effective penalties for deterrence. And as part of the consultation, and as I mentioned earlier, Labor will consider which animal welfare codes are to be mandatory and which are to be advisory, and will recognise the sentience of animals as underpinning the new laws, because we know and need to recognise that animals feel pain. Now, just in regard to some of the specific points that have been raised around the importation of what appeared to be fake fur, but in effect actually is real fur. And these are dealt with under the Australian Consumer Law, which came into force on the 1st of January 2011. And it's a national law that's been applied in Victoria under state legislation. So the Australian Consumer Law prohibits false or misleading representations from businesses about the standard, quality, value or grade of products or services, the composition, style, model or history of products, whether the products are new, whether a particular person agreeing to acquire the products or services, and testimonials by any person relating to products or services, the sponsorship approval, performance characteristics, accessories, benefits and uses of products or services, the price of products or services, the availability of repair facilities for spare parts, for example, or spare parts, the place of origin of a product, for example, where it was made or assembled, and any guarantee, warranty or condition on the product services. So in addition, the Australian Consumer Law also prohibits misleading or deceptive conduct by businesses, and this is a broader prohibition that covers not only statements but all types of conduct. And in certain circumstances, the prohibition can cover omissions or silence. So the Victorian Government is aware of consumer concerns about products that are alleged to have been made overseas from raccoon or dog fur. The Government is also aware of the calls to ban the sale of real fur. And as I just detailed, what the Australian Consumer Law does regulate, the Australian Consumer Law does not regulate the availability of any product. So the only powers that the state or territory ministers have under the Australian Consumer Law to restrict the supply of any product are in relation to safety issues that a product may pose to consumers. And again, under the Australian Consumer Law, it is unlawful to make false or misleading representations about products or services when supplying or offering to supply or promoting products, and those provisions I just outlined a moment ago. So the product labels must be accurate, regardless of the business's intention, and a representation can be misleading even if it's partly true. Making false or misleading representations is an offence under the Consumer Law, and the maximum criminal penalty is $500,000 for individuals, and for companies the maximum penalty is the greater of $10 million or 3 times the value of the benefit gained from the offence, or 10% of annual turnover if the benefit gained from the offence cannot be determined. Additionally, civil penalties for the same amounts apply, along with injunctions, damages, compensation and disqualification orders. Consumers with concerns about possible false or misleading representations should contact Consumer Affairs Victoria for advice and inform them of what they've been made aware of or what they've seen. The import of fur products is also an issue regulated under federal laws as well, but however, notwithstanding this, Consumer Affairs Victoria does have the power to deal with false or misleading product labels, and in response to consumer concerns, the Minister has requested that CAV conduct inquiries into the labelling of fur. The Minister has also asked CAV to liaise with Mr Andy Medic of the Animal Justice Party to obtain any relevant intelligence and testing results and information to inform those investigations. So following consideration of this information, the Consumer Affairs Victoria will undertake marketplace inspections where required to ensure that traders adhere to their labelling obligations under the Australian consumer law. So as can be seen from that contribution, there indeed is two aspects to this. One is obviously under the consumer law, there are penalties and provisions that deal with false and misleading representations. But of course, the other side of that coin does relate to animal welfare concerns, and the government is keen to ensure that sentience is at the centre or part of the cornerstone of our approach to informing our response to any concerns in regard to animal welfare. So, Mr Acting President, I might leave my contribution there at this point, and I thank you.